How's it going, everyone? My name is Falling Hurts, and last night I beat Scorn, and I honestly have some thoughts about the game. This is my review, by the way. So in this video, I would like to talk about how I kind of feel gaslit. I feel lied to. Not by the developers, but by the people who have been playing the game. People made it out to seem like this could literally be World War III for Xbox with Game Pass, or that someone actually snuck into their house and strangled their dog to death with how bad this game actually was. And quite simply, it's not. I do have a few issues with the game that I'll get into, but overall I really enjoyed the experience. So with that being said, let's get right into the review. So to kind of get your need to knows out of the way, Scorn is a kind of horror game, more atmospheric than anything else, set in a kind of biopunk world where a lot of the machinery is very organic and alive looking, and some of the things that create are very much alive. It's inspired, of course, by H.R. Geiger, as I pointed out in my previous video, which is why when you walk around you'll see a lot of things that look like you could just see a xenomorph from the movie Alien walk around in it, but also, as some people pointed out, from Beksinski as well, another artist. And this game comes from Ebb Software, the developer, and this game was kickstarted a long time ago and brought across the finish line from the publisher Kepler Interactive, as well as Microsoft Game Studios. And with that being said, you can play the game on Xbox Series S or X or PC as of right now. And it was also a day one game on Game Pass when it launched on October 14th. Now, for this review, I would like to break down my criticisms and thoughts into 4 major categories, starting with the story, then we'll move on to the gameplay, and then of course the visuals and the sound design. And starting right away with the story, and contrary to popular belief, there actually is a story to this game. It's one of survival and agency of self for some humanoid type creature that you find yourself playing as. The story that we play out in Scorn is one of choosing the continuation of your own journey over the lives of the creatures that you meet. And as I made in my one video breaking down Scorn, which has skyrocketed and become the #1 video on my channel, by the way, with over 40,000 views, and I really appreciate that. But it is that Scorn is a game ultimately about how you feel. They made this very clear in a lot of the marketing leading up to the game, is that Scorn isn't just a first-person survival horror shooter, and that it's a lot more of a walking simulator puzzle type game. And one thing that they really go in depth with the devlogs was that a lot of the story, since there is no dialogue in the game, is more about how the game and its environments, atmosphere, and different things like that make you feel as you play it. Whether it's the music leaving you with a sense of dread, colors and locations making you feel bleak or even super hopeful, and even a sense of accomplishment after a nice puzzle, you always have some emotion to push forward in Scorn. On top of these things though, there is a pretty clear antagonist as you progress through the game, and I won't be spoiling that in this video, but I really enjoyed how persistent and ever-looming that threat was. The whole time I played, I got more and more anxious as these little teases and things like that were hinted at throughout the game, and honestly it felt like waiting for the pen to drop. And I say all that to say this, that while the whole build up to the climax of the game, as well as all of the little moments in between, like I said, the puzzle, the atmosphere, all these things, all culminate in one of the worst endings and most abrupt endings I've ever seen in a game. Again, it's not anything that happens that's necessarily bad, it's just that nothing happens that's good. I mean, there's no satisfaction to the end or anything like that. And ultimately, it does leave a sour taste in my mouth at the end of the game, but the experience, even looking back on it, is really, really awesome. Especially considering that is the main aspect, the experience. Even still, I plan on going back and playing it one more time, seeing as how I know all the puzzles this time around, it'll go a little faster, to go ahead and go and get some of the best screenshots that I can possibly get now that I'm done experiencing the game. Again, without going into spoilers, overall I believe the story was quite unique in its approach. The lack of clear narrative from the storytelling aspects really does allow for the greater themes and emotions of the player to shine through for the true plot of the game. This is quite ballsy in my opinion, and I really mean that, but this is the type of interpretational stuff that really does come off as artsy, if anything else. So I can definitely see where a lot of people do bounce off of that, as they're not being told a very specific narrative and different plot threads to follow. I get it, but at the same time, I also respect exactly what the developers were doing. Next up, I'd like to discuss the gameplay loop itself. And once again, I feel it's proper to set expectations going into what the gameplay loop is, rather than just saying, hey, it's good or it's bad. First off, not a shooter whatsoever. Don't expect a horror FPS shooter, much like Resident Evil or anything like that. There is shooting, and there is horror, but it's not exactly in the ways that you'll think. The guns really do feel more like tools than anything, and the enemies feel more like puzzles rather than just simple, like enemies and cannon fodder, stuff like that. So that in and of itself brings me to the main topic of conversation for this, the puzzles of the game. Now, I'm not going to be all artsy with my interpretation of the puzzles. There's quite literally actual really good puzzles in this game. And one thing that I also really like the developers for doing is not taking any one concept too far, though I do wish they would have fleshed out a few even further. For instance, there's puzzle types in the beginning of the game that you only ever do once, and there's a few that you do a couple times, but overall, I really enjoy the way that it introduces you into these things a little by little and then adds just a bit. But unfortunately, sometimes it never feels fully fleshed out in the sense that you could have went one step further and it wouldn't have even felt like padding to the gameplay. Something that with the runtime of about 5 hours would have actually been welcome for a lot of players, especially those who waited a really long time to play the game. Outside of the actual puzzles themselves, though, I'm also really a big fan of the presentation and kind of the immersive aspects of the HUD and how all of the gameplay is introduced to the player. Starting with the HUD, it's super basic. It's pretty much non-existent on the screen unless you absolutely need it, like taking damage or aiming your weapon. You'll see simple stuff like your stamina bar, as well as your health bar, and even how much healing or bullets you have left. Speaking more of the tutorial aspects of the game and the early on learnings, there is no proper instructions on screen. There's never, hey, the left mouse button will do this, the right mouse button will do this, but you're expected to kind of, as the player, figure that out as you go. Now, there are control schemes in the menu. As soon as you hit start, you'll see it all right there if you ever forget or take a break. But I really like that for an immersive experience, if you're just shutting all that off, you can almost deal most of the game without the HUD too, as you can look down in first person and see all of the healing items that you've acquired, or the ammo, as I said earlier. And really, if you put a nice pair of headphones on and you just listen to this game, you feel all of this game, you're gonna walk away feeling pretty strongly about this game, in my opinion. Now, not to completely suck the dick of Ebb Software here, as I said, I wasn't a fan of the fact that they didn't carry over some of the puzzles a little bit further, but another issue that a lot of people had was actually the combat itself. And I am inclined to agree, but not for the reasons that everyone else is saying so. Most people online were saying that the gunplay feels bad. Well, that is due to bad expectations, expecting, I don't know, Call of Duty fucking Alien Edition, I'm not really sure, but that's just not right. This is very slow, very methodical. You're expected to take your time and deal with enemies accordingly or run away from them. However, my issue with the combat actually comes with the enemies. Quite a few times throughout the game, I actually noticed a lot of kind of broken enemies and they're like kind of tracing around the world. Here's an instance of this right here. Unfortunately, all the other times I noticed it was later in the game where I don't really want to spoil some of the environments that you'll be in, because I think it's really cool to experience those for the first time on your own. But ultimately, I walk away from Scorn really enjoying the time that I spent in the game. The game respects your time while also forcing you to be slow and deliberate, as that's what it wants you to be, which really complements the kind of desolated kind of feel that the main story wants you to go for here. So I believe that the gameplay and the story work in tandem quite well, and for that I have to give props to the developers because it's not something that could have very easily been done. A lot of dissonance up between these two things can really lead to kind of the player feeling like it just doesn't work, which it still didn't for some people, but it does for me. And with those kind of minor gripes aside, I would like to move into the aspects of the game that really hammer it home for me. And those are both the visuals and the sound design. And I'll kind of lump them in together here just a little bit, but I think they work together really well. So, quite simply, this game is beautiful. I mean, honestly, that should at least speak for itself from the trailers. Fans of Alien really will feel right at home here, as I kind of alluded to earlier. Every once in a while, I promise you, I really was looking around expecting to see a xenomorph or something like that around the corner. Anytime I saw an egg, I was like, oh shit, there's a facehugger. Another aspect of the H.R. Giger work that kind of really does show through here is the oddly sexual nature, along with, of course, the biomechanical structures, and they really do give that sense of just not quite right. You always feel uneasy when these environments are around. And another thing that I really noticed, especially watching back some of the gameplay that I recorded for this video, is that a lot of the geometry and the aesthetics of things are made to really make you feel uneasy. You know, geometry not working quite right, you know, half circles and squares that just to humans and what we expect, it kind of reaches into that uncanny valley, but not with actual people with, you know, environments. It's just not right. And that's the best way I can put it, and that's kind of where the horror of this game comes in. It's a sense of uneasiness rather than a sense of full-blown fear. A lot of the machinery that I mentioned earlier is pretty overgrown with different bodies and different things like that. It almost feels like there's a kind of tug and pull between the mechanical as well as the organic aspects of this world, and it seems like you're working your way and cutting your way through it all the same. The use of color, or even lack thereof, especially in the later parts of the game, is really great at both conveying where you need to go, but most importantly, the bleakness of the world. As I said, it all works in tandem to create this certain feeling that the developers want the player to feel at certain points. And with that being said, the environmental variety, going between these different biomes, if you will, is quite good. From the more mechanical structures to the organic ones, there's quite a large range. Even the open space feels really cool. And it really does give a sense of scale. Not to spoil anything, but there's one part of the game where, and this is more of a pro for the gameplay again, is that as you're working your way through this aspect, you're in this big organic creature thing. I'm not going to completely spoil what you'll be doing, but it's just really, really epic. And honestly kind of sad at the same time, but trust me, if you can at least play this game on Game Pass, get to the midpoint of the game and you'll know exactly what I'm talking about, and let me know how you feel. Now, to end on a kind of negative note with the visuals, there is something I noticed on at least the PC version of the game. The VSync is seemingly broken. Whenever I had VSync turned on, it would make the game stutter in ways that just didn't make sense. I mean, it would perform well, but it really did look like, I don't know, Michael J. Fox was holding the camera. Otherwise, very rarely did I ever have a frame out of focus with the depth of field or any minor visual bugs with a texture not loading in right away. And honestly, without even reloading the game, these issues would fix themselves. So visually, I have next to nothing to complain about the game. Turning VSync off is about the only thing that I would suggest. Otherwise, high settings, the game ran just fine. And finally, I'd like to talk about the sound in this video. Honestly, with all of the different blood and gore all around the world, there's more wet squelching in this than a season of Stranger Things. But with those weird sound effects going on, it really does make you just feel like bleh a lot of the time, especially with some of the stuff you'll be doing. This game forces you into situations that are just disgusting, and honestly, the sound design, if nothing else, complements that the most. The use of sound and atmospheric, like music, is definitely used to make you feel uneasy, especially when there's no other reason for it to be that way. You're in a large open space, and it feels like the air around you is breathing, and that's super terrifying, especially when the stuff you run into later kind of backs up what you were feeling in those moments. When I got into the later aspects of the game, the actual real music of the game shined through a little bit more. It didn't just feel, as I said, weird atmospheric things like that. There was actual music, and that's when the game almost gave me that sense of hope, as I was saying. And once again, I compliment the game wholeheartedly for the fact that all these different aspects of the game make me feel different ways. I know this video is going to be, probably not received very well just because of how interpretational I'm taking it, but I really feel that's what the developer was asking for, and that's what I'm putting forward here. So if you got to this point in the video, let me know, and tell me, hey, you're not stupid, or hey, idiot, you're stupid. But regardless, it can't be overstated just how the visuals and the sound design really do work together. As I said, there's going to be things that are super disgusting that we're going to have to do for an objective, and the visuals really sell it as looking disgusting, and the sound really sells it as something that's visceral. And we're violent in this world just as much as the world's violent to us. And ultimately, I think that just works really well. And once again, it's a great addition to the already great gameplay design, where it forces us to do these things, and the story that really asks us to understand what we're feeling here. Otherwise, though, that's about it. I really enjoyed Scorn. If you've played it and you're looking for someone else to hate on the game, you're not going to find that here. If you're looking for something else, then, hey, maybe this was it. I hope I was able to articulate maybe what someone else was feeling, or maybe this explains it better to someone who doesn't know what they're looking for in this game. But personally for me, as far as Scorn is concerned, I consider this game a buy. Whether that be at the full price of $40 or not, that is up to you. If you're someone who really believes that they can enjoy the kind of experience that I've laid out here, then getting it right now won't be that big of a deal. Or if you think you can wait around a little bit longer as there's no heavy story spoilers that you can get, then maybe consider waiting for a sale. Definitely $20 for anyone who is even curious about this game, I would consider worth it. For any walking simulators, as this one tends to lean towards, $20 is always a good threshold for that sort of thing. Otherwise, I recommend playing the game now. It's spooky season. If you can go out and get the game for 10% off or on Game Pass, I definitely recommend it there as well. I hope that's not as wishy-washy as it sounds in my head right now, but I really enjoyed the game, and I think anyone who's open to what this experience could be will as well. If you're into the puzzles that this game goes into, something that takes it even a little bit further with more of an inventory management is actually a game series called Penumbra, specifically Penumbra Overture and Black Plague. These are the games from Frictional Games, the developer of Amnesia or Soma. Also great games that kind of take these concepts a little further, but in my opinion, not quite as crazy. So if nothing else in this video, if you got this far, you got a pretty cool recommendation for some more horror games, which are honestly a little bit more scary than this one was. Regardless, my name's Falling Hurts. Thank you so much for watching this video. I hope you liked it. At least consider maybe liking or subscribing. And yeah, that's it. Bye.